Hello and welcome back to Courtside. I'm Andrew Cohen, joined by Mike Randall, Sam Posman. How you guys doing today?
Doing well.
Yeah, excited to be here.
It's a very special episode. We have a very special guest, head coach of Bowdoin football, Coach BJ Hammer. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
I'm excited to be here.
We wanted to start off with the GOAT debate in the NBA.
Potentially the most contentious sports debate out there right now.
That's true. Now, Mike, you think LeBron's the GOAT?
I do think LeBron's the GOAT.
Coach, who do you think's the GOAT?
Well, Mike knows my answer. It's definitely not LeBron. So I grew up in the 80s watching Larry Bird and Michael Jordan and all those guys play basketball. So I'm a big Reggie Miller guy from Indiana, but Michael Jordan is by far in the 80s and 90s. You can't even compare. So Michael Jordan by far, and LeBron isn't even in my top 3 or 4. So he's maybe 5. So because you got to throw Kareem in there, and you got to throw Larry Bird and Magic and potentially Kobe or like an Allen Iverson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know I'm probably not going to be able to flip you on Jordan, but I might be able to convince you to sneak LeBron up there in the top 5 if I do a good job.
Maybe.
We'll see. Andrew and Sam, do you guys at least want to give us your initial?
Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time.
Yeah,
I do think LeBron's number 2, but I do think there's definitely a gap. Now, the past couple days, 2 nights ago, we watched Game 7 of the Cavs-Warriors 3-1 comeback, and last night we watched the last episode of The Last Dance. And when you're watching the last episode of The Last Dance and you see Michael Jordan take over at the end of the game, it's goosebumps. It's goosebumps.
Look, I'm gonna be on here talking LeBron, and the dude's cold. I watched The Last Dance too and loved it. I'm not here to degrade anything about MJ. Last Dance is the greatest television program I've ever seen, and that episode is just cold, killer. But
by the end of it,
he's number 2.
By the end of it, Andrew and I just both looked at Mike with the are you seriously going to go up against this guy?
No, I was ready.
He was. It's more of reality denial at this point.
Yeah.
But no, I'm with you, Coach and Andrew. Every time I go back and I just watch old Jordan things, my mindset is always it's just so unfair to other NBA superstars that they have to be compared to this guy, and it's such a high level to reach. Where it speaks volumes if you're in the same conversation as him, but it's almost disrespectful to what he was as the cultural icon to say that someone has surpassed him. As someone who at one point on a Tuesday night game against, who was it, Indiana or Charlotte, LeBron goes for 55 points, and I walk in and I'm like, he's the GOAT, right? It has to be him. So I've been going back and forth. I used to argue with my dad a lot. I would always say it was LeBron, and then I was informed. And then I was it's definitely Jordan without a doubt. Last November, I went to the Celtics-Lakers game. It was LeBron's first game back, and I saw the aura that was him. I was like, it's got to be LeBron. And then I recalibrated where I was at, realized that I'd fallen to the dark side of the force, if you will, and I'm back on the train, and I'm here to stay.
Okay.
3-on-1. Anything to
3-on-1.
say?
Hey.
He's come back from 3-1.
Hey,
That's
he has
true.
come back.
That is
This
true.
is a familiar position. So I will say, Sam, you brushed on a little bit, and The Last Dance really touches this. And, Coach, you're going to know way more about this than we will because we didn't grow up in this era. But the legacy and the legend surrounding Jordan, I think, is pretty untouchable. That's not what I'm here to poke holes in because LeBron doesn't carry that same aura. I think a lot of that has to do with era. Social media, right? LeBron is so scrutinized. We've been following this guy with a microscope since he was in high school. So Jordan kind of had this era of invincibility and still does in many senses. So I understand that. And I understand as a cultural icon, he's at a place LeBron won't reach. However, on the basketball court, I have some arguments I would like to make, and I'll get to them if we're good. So I had to jot some notes down to just keep myself pointed in the right direction.
It's a whole essay right there.
Hey, it's just a couple bullet points.
Do you get a couple paragraphs?
I do. All right, so as a basketball player, I think even you guys will probably agree all around in terms of all facets of the game, LeBron's a better all-around player. Jordan was a better pure scorer, but LeBron is in the same vicinity as him, I think, in that terms. And then rebounding and assists, LeBron's a good bit ahead. Defensively, I think it's a good argument. I think Jordan maybe as a one-on-one defender is maybe a little bit better, but LeBron has proven to be an incredibly good help side defender, transition defender, great individual defender as well, but he has an ability for timely defensive stops and blocks, particularly we saw in Game 7 and a lot of different games throughout his career. So I think his overall game, I think, is superior to Jordan's. I think that's shown a little bit in his all-time rankings statistically. He's going to wind up finishing with 40,000 points, 10,000 assists, and 10,000 rebounds. Jordan, well above the 30,000 mark in points, is never got close to those other marks in the other areas of the game. He was much more a plug-in assassin in terms of his scoring ability, which was, unparalleled. But I think LeBron, in general, is a more well-rounded basketball player. And to that point, I think, in terms of his effectiveness on the court, that has allowed him, I think, arguably his greatest kind of the feather in his cap in this debate is that he's gone to 3 different teams, won championships with 3 different teams. 2 of those organizations are highly dysfunctional, had a history of dysfunction before he got there, and he almost immediately turned them into contenders and won a title. So you can argue Jordan never got the opportunity to do that, and maybe he could have, but at the end of the day, he didn't. And LeBron is the only player to have gone and won Finals MVPs with 3 different franchises. And I think that's
who's dysfunctional besides Cleveland, obviously.
L.A. The last few years with the Lakers has been pretty. We're seeing it now too with the team right now.
You're stretching, Mike Randall.
No. The Kobe years were good, and then the Genie Bus takeover has been itchy.
You're still stretching.
All right. Well, you can at least admit to Cleveland was a disaster when he got there. So I think regardless, even if they were stable organizations, to come in and lead 3 different organizations to a title is pretty impressive. And I think to that extent, I think he's the best building block that we've ever seen in terms of you can build almost any type of roster around him, and he is able to almost become the system and make everyone else better and foster winning out of regardless of what it is. Jordan, like I kind of mentioned, is an all-time great winner, and I'm not here to dispute that at all, right? He does have more championships, LeBron. I can't argue that number. It's the number. But he needed a specific roster and specific type of team, an elite coach, a few different players to fill different roles, like the playmaking role, right, that Pip filled for all those years. And once he got those, he was unstoppable. And I, again, can't argue with the dominance he had over that 8-year stretch, but I think LeBron is able to lift rosters with varying levels of talent, varying players, right? He's won with guards as his second best player. He won with a big man as his second best player in Anthony Davis. So I think he's more well-rounded and more versatile. So on the court, that would be my argument towards him being a superior basketball player to Jordan. Although it is razor thin. I'm not here to be disrespectful to Jordan or anything like that. Anyone, Coach, want to poke some holes?
There's a lot of holes, but
I'm sure.
Michael and LeBron were basically on the same trajectory. If you look at his early start, he was doing it all by himself in the early years, and then all of a sudden it clicked. Now, part of that was the competition level.
Mm-hmm.
You had Lakers, you got the Celtics, you had the Pistons. Yep. You had some really good teams. You had so many of them. But look what Jordan did. I mean, he's never lost in the finals. Okay, never lost.
That is true.
Never lost. LeBron has lost many times.
Yep.
He had to leave Cleveland to go win.
Yep.
Had to leave. What happened the first year? He was at Miami.
That didn't go good.
That's quite a stain, isn't it?
I've admitted to that too. That would be the stain.
All you got to do is say Dirk Nowitzki, and that's enough. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Dirk. Dirk's a damn good player, but Michael Jordan would never lost Dirk Nowitzki. Never. And he had Bosch, Ray Allen.
He didn't have Ray up. He had D-Wade, but D-Wade was...
And they had just won the finals in like 06, 07 or
yeah.
something like that. Yeah. So that's my big argument right there, is Michael didn't have to go anywhere to do it. And like I said, I'm not a huge Bulls fan. I mean, I remember in 1998, Game 6 in Indiana. I'm at the game. I'm in college. It was awesome. Pacers won. Reggie Miller hit a huge shot.
Oh, that's
See the Bulls players walking away.
That's awesome.
Game 7, we were all at my buddy's house, and we were all watching. All been Pacers fans forever, and Michael just took over. Was not going to lose the game, So it's the clutch gene. It's the competitor in Michael Jordan. Like, the only person I've ever seen like that was probably Kobe and Iverson. And nothing against LeBron. I mean, I saw LeBron play in high school. So, great story. I was a GA, Heidelberg College. My other GA, the offensive GA, said we're leaving to go on a recruiting trip. So we went away, and he's like, hey, we're not going recruiting. we're going to this game. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So we had to scalp tickets and went to Akron University or whatever and watched him play at St.
Vincent's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was a freak. Absolutely. It was crazy. I was sitting there watching, packed house, never seen anything like it in high school. But still, you just can't compare the two. You just can't.
Okay.
I think one's a winner, one just absolutely clutch, just a killer. And the other one, great player, but I think something's missing there. And I agree with you, the scrutiny and all that stuff, but still, Michael Jordan's done it all,
Yep.
done it all.
Yeah.
Great defensive player, great offensive player, great passer. I think LeBron's great in transition. He's had those great blocks and everything like that. But he won that title with Cleveland, Kyrie Irving. That's why.
Okay.
Well, I pointed this out when we were watching it. So LeBron has the block in that game. Kyrie hits the shot.
Yep.
Jordan gets the layup to bring him within one possession, gets the steal, and hits the shot. That's cold.
That's
cold.
It was. I'm not going to debate that was cold. It was that game 6 against the Jazz. You can argue is the best game an individual player's ever had, and I'm not.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to dispute some of the great things Jordan's done to argue LeBron. And Coach, I think you brought up a lot of the points that people who have this argument have, and I mean a lot of them are tough to argue with, right? Like Jordan did go 6-0 with the finals. The Dirk Nowitzki, the one thing you will not hear me try to defend is that series. It was a low. LeBron did not show up. He didn't rise to the occasion, and it was really disappointing. And if that's the stain that keeps Jordan above you, that's a hard thing for me to try to argue, right? My argument would then be, from that point on, he matured more into this stone-cold killer. And if you want to argue that, hey, Jordan didn't have to mature into that, fine. But once LeBron did, the next decade of basketball, I would argue, is the greatest decade of basketball we've ever seen. I know Jordan had his dynastic stretch, but like it or not, he did have to take a break in there, retired again. LeBron went on an absolute rampage, and from that point on, we saw, especially with that Celtics series the next year, he became that killer, I think.
I'll take your 10 years of basketball and up you a Bill Russell.
All right, well, I'm talking like...
You're going deep dive, way back.
Once the
Anyway.
league had more than eight teams.
I think the toughness factor, too. I mean, you can't know LeBron plays in, LeBron likes to flop. He's a flop guy. You couldn't flop back when Jordan was playing.
No, that's true.
You were playing the Pistons, man, Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn. You had the Knicks with Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley. You had the Pacers, Dale Davis, Antonio Davis, and the list. They all had those guys. LeBron, he'd either adapt, right? Darwinism. He's going to adapt, or he's going to keep flopping and crying. And he does a lot of flopping and crying. And to me, if you're the best, you ain't doing that. You're not doing that.
Okay. I got a response to that, but Sam, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I have something about your LeBron can win with bad teams, but MJ can't. And LeBron can take dysfunctional franchises to greatness.
Okay. Can I respond to the toughness?
Sure.
All right. So the one argument I would have, and this, again, it's the one I've heard, is, all right, so you got LeBron. He is, what do we want to call him, 6'9", 260,
Yep, sure.
right? Just 4% body fat, just absolute specimen. I would argue, and I don't like the flopping either. I think you guys have watched games with me where LeBron's done a little showmanship, and I've been like, really?
Remember when he slapped his wrist and then made it look at the ref?
Remember when he got poked in the eye
Hey.
last play-in game?
Hit that shot.
Play-in
Hit that
game.
shot.
Hit the
I
shot.
saw
but it was
3 rims.
rolling around. I can't see, but you just hit a shot. I don't know.
My argument would be, I think that he would adjust to that error fine. I don't think the players at that point were big enough, strong enough, fast enough to handle him. I think he would be devastating.
He'd be Sean Kemp. I don't think he could.
Sean Kemp in the paint with Magic Johnson on the perimeter. That's the mix. But I would almost argue, and you can think whatever you think about this. I think undisputably he's one of the smartest basketball players we've ever seen, and I think he understands to an extent the way the game has changed and the rules have changed, and that there is some strategy now to selling foul calls. James Harden has put up thousands of points by doing it. Regardless of what you think in terms of like sportsmanship and pride and all this stuff, there's an extent to, if he is able to generate points and possessions and look for his team and points for himself by selling fouls, and it's been effective, then maybe that's why he does it. And the other thing you can say is Shaq had trouble in the early 2000s with he's so big, he's so dominant, he's reffed differently. And LeBron, at some points, it can feel like he's been reffed differently in that sense. So maybe he's trying to sell it a little more to say, hey, I know I'm this big, strong guy, but I got it. They are fouling me. This is basketball. You can't just hammer me because I'm bigger than you. So he sells it a little bit, and some people may not like that.
Well, couldn't you say LeBron kind of ushered in the change, though? Because if you think about it, like, you had the period where kind of Kobe took over after Jordan really retired, and, he's an old guy still scoring a ton of points for the Bullets or Wizards, But, like, when did it change? Because that's the big thing, because we had Shaq and Kobe were doing their thing, but did LeBron kind of usher in that change with this stuff? That's the thing, because it used to be a little more of a physical game. I like watching the playoffs. I don't like watching regular season.
Yeah.
So I watched a little bit of the Timberwolves game last night and the Clippers after our practice, and I can't believe Timberwolves came back. I thought they were dead in the water in the third. Then I went to bed. But no, I mean, it's different. I think the playoffs, they heat up a little bit, and the refs kind of, what do they say?
Swallow the whistle.
Swallow the whistle. Yeah. But you're right. I just don't know. I don't know if he could adapt or not. I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to say. But Michael Jordan never had seasons like LeBron had right now. I know he's older, but
I would argue against that because of what you just mentioned. At this advanced stage of his career, and I'm not going to – you'll get a rant from me in our next podcast episode about the Lakers, so I won't dive into that. But Jordan did have his Wizard season, regardless of what you think of those or not. So advanced stage of his career, everything around him kind of falls apart. Maybe he can't elevate and carry teams the way I'm arguing he could when he was in his prime. So I think both of their careers – their legacies are to a point where the last few years, I don't think anything they do can really subtract from them unless he were to have another Dallas series in the playoffs. But I think a regular season.
Well, the big thing to think about too with that is the training has changed.
That is true.
You got Sam and Mike. We trained you guys way differently than I ever trained when I was in college. The rest, there was no rest. They were doing 6 a.m. shoot-arounds, all that kind of stuff. A different deal. I mean, plus Michael was probably drinking tequila or bourbon, smoking cigars, and LeBron obviously the dude's impressive, so he's on the Versa climber and has private chefs and all that stuff, and I'm pretty sure Michael didn't have that. He was probably out playing golf and drinking and smoking cigars and doing his thing and still scoring 35 a night. So you got to incorporate a little bit of that. Now that's sign of the times, and I'm sure Michael, when you kind of watch the stuff that was on Netflix or whatever it was.
Last Dance,
You can see he changed a little bit when he came back in the mid-'90s, but still, I mean, there's a big difference. 37 back then.
There is. I pointed it out in the episode we watched yesterday that he was at a shoot-around before the Jazz game. Someone asked him, "What'd you do this morning?" He's like, "Oh, I got up, had a couple beers, smoked." He's like, "I only smoked one cigar," and then he was at. And to your point, that was Game 6.
Yeah, your point about dragging bad teams.
Yeah.
So Cleveland's every Cleveland franchise is a dysfunctional franchise.
It is.
There's a fantastic Bill Burr joke where he says Cleveland's the only place that ISIS will fly over and say what the hell happened here. And it has definitely trickled down to their sports franchises. But I think it's fair to say that his first stint in Cleveland, that was probably one of the worst constructed rosters of all time, outside of LeBron James. But he didn't win there. He leaves, they get all these draft picks, they bring in Kevin Love, they bring in Kyrie Irving. He comes back, and then he wins. And he only wins one of 4, right?
Yeah.
Which now he went up against the best constructed team of all time. So I don't blame him for that. But to say that he took them out, like they rose because of him, I don't think is fair. And then he goes to Miami. They've got all the talent. He wins 2 out of the 4 there. Now, it wasn't a deep roster, but we all know once playoff time comes, it's only your top 6 or 7 or 8 that really matter. And now in LA, that roster was comically bad to start. He trades everyone, which now we can't say it wasn't a bad trade because they won a title.
There's an asterisk on that one too. It was in the bubble. It's,
I don't see it that way. Surprisingly.
But Mickey and A. Disney.
But then they win their title, and they say, okay, LeBron, you control the roster now. And he probably makes the worst roster decision, of all time.
Oh, my.
They could have had a top 3 scorer in the league right now, DeMar DeRozan, and they're stuck with Russell Westbrook, who is the opposite of Jordan in terms of willing a team to win.
They could have also added Buddy Hield. They need a shooter desperately.
So I feel like, in a way, he almost did the opposite in LA, where he comes in, they reach such a high, and then he takes them to such a low. And I mean, it definitely isn't because of his on-the-court play. That's not fair to like. He had an all-time season this year. It was insane to watch. Like we said, I thought he was the GOAT at one point this year. Yeah. But I think the roster construction stuff is definitely a concern.
I do also want to add on that point. We talk about how they went up against the Warriors. The player movement era was started by LeBron. Mm-hmm. And so he does have a hand in that. And that also extends to you see great superstar players have an impact on the roster decisions that the teams make.
Yep. And
is LeBron necessarily deciding on whether they sign Trevor Ariza or Kent Bazemore? No. But Russell, the reports are DeMar DeRozan was going to be a Laker.
The big moves for sure.
And
consult him. Yeah.
He's like, hey, I talked to Russ. That's the guy I want. And that team was poorly. You could tell from the beginning it was a poorly constructed team.
Yeah.
And now,
go ahead.
But on the point of coaching, too, obviously there was no Phil Jackson in LeBron's life. Mm-hmm. But now we see Ty Lue, and we're talking about, maybe we underrated this guy. He dragged this injury-ridden Clippers team so far this year. Frank Vogel, who's always been I'm a good coach when I have good defensive bigs. He had his defensive bigs, and they won the title that year. And Spo, who is just consistently he was a 1 seed this year with a roster probably fit for a 4 or 5 seed.
Yeah.
And he's getting into fights with his best player. So the fact that is something that, it only ages against LeBron, I think it kind of negates that part of the argument.
So I don't disagree with some of what you said about his LA tenure, right? But like I just said to Coach here is, I think at this point that's more he might have I think he wasted a year this year where maybe he could have made up ground in this argument had they won a title or contended. And yes, the player movement, Andrew, you're right. And I actually think that's a feather in his cap to an extent, in that he's influenced and changed the game to that extent, and came back and bit him a little bit with the Golden State and Kevin Durant for sure. But Sam, more what I was getting at in terms of his ability to raise a team up, it doesn't necessarily involve championships. It talks a little bit about, Coach, you mentioned how they started off similarly. They both had kind of that 7-year stretch at the beginning where they didn't really win anything. Now, you can certainly argue that Jordan ran into better teams, like you mentioned, like the Bird Celtics team. Of course he's not getting over the hump there, right? He did beat that pretty good Cavs team with the ELO shot. But LeBron had an incredibly dysfunctional Cleveland team. I mean, to be fair, Jordan had a pretty really dysfunctional Bulls team too. But LeBron very quickly, we're talking by the time he was 22, was able to elevate that team over a team and that Pistons team that had won a title, been to a title, another finals, been to a bunch of conference championships, single-handedly. I mean, with one of the greatest playoff games we've ever seen, puts them up over and gets to them to the finals. He's also consistently battling it out with Pierce's Celtics and various other good teams in the East at that point. I'm more arguing that he's able to elevate teams with just brutally bad rosters up into the upper echelons of the playoffs, numerous conference finals appearances, a finals appearance. They get wiped out by San Antonio, but that's almost like running to a Spurs Celtics team. That team was a machine. Yeah. So that would be my argument to the extent that he can elevate teams, is that first stretch. Jordan did get up deep with the Pistons, so I don't want to act like he didn't win at all. But I think LeBron had a bit more success with less talent. And then, I mean, he won the title in Cleveland. Yeah, he had a better team. You have to have some sort of function here. That's why I'm able to make this argument. But the team he had wasn't better than the team he played in Golden State, and he's still able to elevate them over them. And then I think the first Cleveland team he had upon his return with Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, they weren't there. They were gone. And he pushes that dynastic Golden State team to 6, and a competitive 6 at that. I mean, a couple bounces go their game in Game 1. They're up 3-1, and they probably end up winning that series without those two guys. So I think that you can argue Jordan didn't have as many opportunities or fair shots due to competition or just the situation he was in, or the fact that he did get better players sooner to prove that he could elevate lesser talented teams as deep in the playoffs as LeBron did. But I do think LeBron has done it and shown that he can do it because he is a system unto himself, that if you get players that he can work with, he can expand their abilities. He's gotten guys like J.R. Smith and Tristan Thompson paid $100 million because of his ability to elevate their...
I mean, any good player should be able to do that, though. That's
no,
the thing.
I
you
agree.
Look at all of them. I mean, look at Larry Bird
Yep.
and, those guys, Isaiah Thomas. I mean, those two Piston teams, you guys weren't alive, but they were incredible.
I've seen the bad boys.
Those
30
guys,
30.
They were incredible. And Isaiah Thomas was one of those guys. He elevated everybody around him.
Yep.
So that's what a good player should do. I guess that's my point. Like, it's like he should do that. He's one of the better players in the league now. I don't know if the league is I know there's a lot of good young players, but I don't know if the league is deep, in what they do and how they operate nowadays. But I think the biggest thing that bothers me right now with the NBA is these guys, they kind of kowtow to the LeBron Jameses and the Kevin Durants. You look at like Jason Tatum. I don't know if he's doing it anymore, but I listen to the talk radio coming into work every morning, and they always talk about these guys as kind of like are the little brother to these guys. And that's something like Jordan, Bird, Magic. Those guys never would have been like that. Never. Not even on their own team. I mean, Magic to Kareem, man. I mean, they would never be in that situation. So I don't know. It's a little different dynamic and competitiveness and the whole deal. So hard to compare, but I still say Michael. No matter what you read in those 8 paragraphs you got there, with your Bowdoin wisdom and knowledge, but I don't know. You're not going to convince me.
I
Good
understand.
argument.
I mean, I was here to make my case, and I felt like I made as compelling a case as I could.
It was a valiant effort.
Osmond's rolling his eyes constantly.
Nick Wright would be proud of me. I think I really changed some minds.
That's a really great guy to look up to.
Maybe I got him into your top 5. Maybe bumped him up a few spots. Yeah,
man, Kareem's on the rise. You forget how good that guy.
He's
was,
about to pass Kareem. He's about to wipe his biggest accomplishment right off the map.
All his titles?
Shut up.
All right, while we end off there, we'll take a break and we'll come back. Brady versus Belichick.
This will be fun. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to another, arguably a greater sports debate.
No.
Arguably
there is
greater.
no greater sports debate.
I don't know. I think
It's a good one.
It's a great one.
It's a doozy.
Brady versus Belichick. Coach, who do you attribute the Patriots dynasty more to?
And that's tough. It really is. So, and this is such a cop-out answer, but the early years, definitely Belichick. As Brady progressed, definitely Brady. Now, it's just the makeup of the roster, salary cap, all that stuff. But if you watch, like, I remember 01, Brady wasn't there. He was kind of managing the game. And no one would ever associate Tom Brady with that. But those Belichick defenses were amazing back then. Yeah. They were truly amazing. What they did to Donovan McNabb when he was in his heyday too, and those. I mean, there was just some revolutionary stuff there. And Belichick was doing it with the Giants, with the LTE, Lawrence Taylor, and those guys. So early on, definitely. But man, Brady rolled. And I'm a Colts fan, so I love Manning, Brady, watching those things. And as a football guy, those two guys were so incredible taking over the games. I think Manning overall did more than Brady did, probably with a less because of how they built it, But because he didn't had the defenses that Brady did. Don't make this a Brady Manning debate. But I mean,
that sounds like my LeBron Jordan debate.
But as Brady got on, I mean, it's incredible what he does now, and he just knows so much football. Like you can let him run the show, and guys like that. You get guys like that. That's incredible. But it doesn't happen when you come in day one. Yeah. Belichick, I don't know if you guys know this, he would meet with Tom Brady, even though he coached defense. He'd meet with him just to go over defense. And after 10 years of that, Tom Brady kind of took it. So they both played a major role in it. I hate copping out on the answer, but early definitely Coach Belichick. And then Tom Brady just became unstoppable, and the only thing that could stop him was a knee or his wife or whatever now, whatever's going on.
Or
now.
Eli Manning.
So, Eli Manning.
Eli Manning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shout out.
No, I totally agree with that. I have the similar answer. I'm a big Patriots fan. I've watched them for years, obviously, and it always feels like on their own, in their own careers, they could have won a few, but together, that's why they're able to win 6 together. I also agree, especially later in the dynasty, where right after Brady leaves, the rosters, it was worse than those Super Bowl teams, but that roster, the Cam Newton year, was one of the worst rosters I've ever seen. And Brady was, even just the year before, at least dragged them to the playoffs, even if it wasn't a loss. But one of the things that I think makes him so impressive is when guys get, quote, answers to the test, right? When they're later in their careers, they're not usually getting better at physically playing the quarterback position too. And that's what Brady does. The one thing, though, is when you think about the Patriots making the decision, Brady or Bill, by keeping Bill, you allow yourself to hopefully build the next team. Whereas if you keep Brady, you're selling out for another few years, and then you go into the dumpster. But
Hey, Jerry Reinsdorf did the same thing. Worked out well
Oh,
for him.
really
didn't it?
worked out great.
I mean, Brady in that Falcon Super Bowl. I mean, just willing
Oh,
him
yeah.
back. And my wife's from New England, so she's a huge Patriots fan, terribly annoying Patriots fan. And she was so mad at that game. We had a bunch of staff members. I was in Pennsylvania at the time, and just so mad. She went in the other room, didn't want to watch with anybody. And then she's, they get on their roll, man.
Yep.
She's back in there, having a great time, talking smack to everybody. So, like that's just incredible. I mean, the guy, just incredible. But, yeah, the Giants got him twice. But, just what he did, you can't beat that. You could just see the wheels turning as he continued to progress.
Yeah.
And Nick Foles got him once too.
Hey, don't forget those birds.
So that's actually that is beneficial to Brady's legacy because he throws for 500 yards in that game, and Belichick benches Malcolm Butler. They replace him with Jordan Richards, who he was terrible. He stunk. He was just a hole out there on defense, and he got 42 points. My God.
The Nelson Aguilar game.
So you're telling me that a player playing great in a championship and losing can be beneficial to his legacy?
Yeah.
LeBron. Sorry, Sam, did you have a think on this?
I was just going to say that neither one would be anywhere without Adam Vinatieri.
Leave it in the hands of a kicker.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
So my look at this, Coach, I agree with you and Andrew in terms of how the importance of each one kind of shifted. And I agree that it certainly lines up with Brady's maturity as a player, but I think it also lines up with how the game has changed. And I think you could easily speak to this much better than any of us could. But at the time when Belichick was really kind of the catalyst of those early Super Bowl teams, it was almost like we talked about in the NBA. It's a much more physical league, right? DBs can get their hands all over receivers. Quarterbacks are just taking a beating, right? There's not all these different rules we've seen that encourage offense. So Belichick's style and his aggressive defensive coaching and a game-managing Tom is able to win very effectively in that era. And then as we get older, and it kind of coincides with Tom becoming a greater quarterback, which I think is just great for the Pats. But as the game shifts and the league starts to push the game towards more offense, right, much more ticky-tacky rules on the outside like we see with the NBA, kind of similar case. Quarterbacks no longer get hit. That certainly played a role in Tom's longevity. That not only did it make Tom's ability to produce offense easier because the rules changed, it made Belichick's ability to coach dominant defense more difficult. So you see games like the Eagles game or even the Falcons game where teams are able to jump out and put points on the board in the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden Belichick's vaunted defenses don't appear to be what they are anymore because a lot of what he coached, especially like you mentioned those LT eras, the Willie McGinnis Patriots teams, you can't get up and be as physical as you could. You can't batter a quarterback to the extent those Giants LT teams used to just kill people.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, not only did Tom become a great quarterback, but the game became more offensive and especially more quarterback dependent as Tom became greater. So it simultaneously kind of pushed up his greatness in a sense and detracted from the ability of Belichick to influence the game the way he had earlier on in the dynasty. So it creates that kind of divide, and it's probably sort of around the late 2000s, early 2010s that we start to see that growth. And then as the rules have really expanded to incorporate offense in the last 5 years, we've seen Tom just go crazy again with all these wins.
Probably after Tom tore his ACL, when Matt Castle had to come in and play quarterback. I think there was I think that set it all off, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because I think he did in like week 1, maybe week 2 or something like that.
I think right away, yeah.
Week 1 after the undefeated year.
Yeah.
So that really ushered in that whole thing. So
Yeah, the league realizes you don't want your
Yeah,
money makers
exactly.
going out with low blows. So
Yeah. No, I think what's really interesting about that year in particular where Matt Castle goes 11-5, so I think that gave Bill a lot of confidence, especially late in Brady's career, to say, hey, I can let Brady go. I can do it with someone else, right? I find another Mac Jones. Find a guy who can manage the offense. I'll take care of the defense. And I think there's a quote from a book way back in the early part of the dynasty where someone in the Patriots front office was like, we all believe if we have a top 15 quarterback, we'll win the Super Bowl. And so, like, when they're going and drafting Mac Jones, that's kind of the mindset that everyone's thinking is like, oh, they're just going for a guy who can manage the game, get to be one of the top in the top half of starting quarterbacks in the league. Do you guys think that Bill Belichick can get back there to a Super Bowl with the same formula? Because that seems to be what they're trying right now.
Coach, you know the game better than any of us, do you?
It's tough right now. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look in the AFC with the Western Division, so Russell Wilson's in there now. I love the quarterback for the Chargers. That guy is incredible.
Herbert,
You have him, and then everyone. Derek Carr's really good.
Yeah.
Then Denver got Wilson, right? So who am I missing? There's one other, Kansas City.
Best quarterback in the league.
So you got Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that's hard. And then obviously the Burrow kid is incredible. Like I said, I'm a Colts fan. So Matt Ryan, I've always thought he has been incredibly underrated. So maybe with a good running back and team around him, that jumps that. And, I mean, you can look. I mean, Dolphins got a few weapons now. I don't think Tua is going to be is in that realm, but it's going to be hard.
It's a good team.
It's going to be hard. There's some really good young quarterbacks. And this league is that driven now. But we'll see. I mean, and you can't be afraid to make moves. I mean, the Rams have paid off for them.
Yep.
We'll see what happens. They don't have any draft picks, but see where that goes for them. But it's tough. I mean, the NFL is interesting, but I think those Burrow and Herbert and those guys, it's going to be to beat those guys is going to be tough as they progress. But it's NFL. Injuries happen.
I don't think they can do it. I'm just a notorious Mac Jones hater, so that's one of the reasons why. Anything that came out of Alabama isn't good, except for Steve Sarkisian. He's one of the best minds in football right now. But other than that, nothing. But no, I don't think they can do it. The other thing is they're not willing to spend any money in free agency. In the 1 year they tried it, it didn't really work.
I mean, I would argue they weren't going out there trying to sign everybody and be like, okay, we're getting Pro Bowler after Pro Bowler. They were so bad in the draft for so long
that they just
needed to get guys. And that's
But that's the other thing is, like, if you're not spending the right money in free agency and you're just accumulating draft picks because you're not making moves and you can't draft, like, you can't.
Well, he can. Because you all Sam, where he struggled was the picks you would recognize, the receivers. He's been terrible at drafting receivers, but he's been one of the best at drafting linemen, defensive linemen. I mean, Chandler Jones was a Patriots draft pick. They just couldn't keep him. But you look at all the old linemen he drafted third round. All these guys are really good players. He just the big names that we all know, or you guys do. I don't do fantasy, but I mean, N'Keal Harry. If he was, you could have picked so many guys.
I can give you 5 minutes on N'Keal Harry.
So that's a thing. And
Sam Acho was a Patriots draft pick.
So,
yeah, I agree with that. The one point I would make to that quickly is I think that's why he was so effective. Belichick and the Pats were so effective for so long with a lot of no-name guys, like you mentioned, that seemingly come out of nowhere and just fit the scheme well. The one problem I would say with that is, as the league has done such a sort of 180 towards passing, it's much more critical to hit on receiver picks now. You can't afford to miss on wideouts. They're not kind of the cherry on top of the sundae anymore. Right there, they're a really critical part of roster creation. So if you keep missing on them, you end up having to go out and splurge on guys like Kendrick Bourne, who's kind of a 3, but play him as a 2 or a 1 because you're in a tough spot. Now back to your question about if you think they can make a Super Bowl. If they were in the NFC, potentially in the way that San Francisco made one a couple years ago and almost did this year, I'm with you, Coach. Though I think the quarterback play in the AFC, especially like I mentioned with the rules and the game being where it is just so incredible that unless we watched that Bills Chiefs game, and that game literally might change the league. We're already starting to see rule changes out of it because teams are realizing, like, unless our quarterbacks can hang with that, because you got to beat that 3 times in one run just to get there now, right? That like I said, I think with the state of the league being where it is and the Pats roster not being up to par, that you would have to have an incredible roster around Mac Jones and an off day from one of those guys to have a shot to beat one of them. But then you got to do it 2 more times. So I think it's incredibly difficult in the AFC for them to break through. And I think, honestly, Bill may have overcalculated his ability to reload and rebuild a roster in today's league because of how it's changed.
Well, I was going to mention that I think Bill the GM recently has kind of hurt Bill the coach because some bad first-round draft picks, some bad second-round draft picks, second-round secondary picks from Bill Belichick. Not good. Not good. But I think what's interesting, to go back to the Brady-Belichick debate, though, is the fact that we get to see, like, we never saw LeBron or Jordan play against each other, right? Brady and Bill Belichick Belichick's still coaching. Brady's in Tampa. Brady won a Super Bowl. You kind of just go, hey, scoreboard. And it's a lot easier. When you're a great player, you can go elevate a team. It's really easy to just say, hey, this team's really good now. But Bill's got to build up that team again. They have no cornerbacks this year. There's a huge turnover at the linebacking core because last year everyone was too slow, and the Bills just torched them. And so that's what I think is interesting to see is if Bill got the roster back up and running again, could they have a chance? Because if he's as good as as he is, they should.
One of the things that Bill has impressed me with outside of the elite caliber of a resume is he was a decade ahead of the curve of the don't pay running backs and rotate your backfield so no one gets hurt. And he's just won countless Super Bowls off that. And he's had perfect guys to do that.
Yeah.
And then they'll leave and they'll go out and they'll get too much money and then they'll get hurt. And then he looks like the genius.
And then they'll come back and play for like a 1-year cheap contract to prove themselves again.
Exactly.
Yep. All right. Why don't we end it off there? Take a quick break. Then we'll get coaches Mount Rushmore of American sports.
Awesome. Cool.
All right, Coach. All week we've been talking about getting your American sports Mount Rushmore. Who are the 4?
Wow. So some are personal. 2 are definitely like personal opinions, just because that just growing up and who I love to watch. So number 1 is John Riggins. Played running back for the Washington Redskins. Born outside of D.C. First football I ever watched with those guys. Had his jersey, went to Redskins Park with my dad, watched him practice, play. They won the Super Bowl. I mean, the guy was incredible. So look him up. Awesome. We named our dog after him. The dog's name was Riggins. Everybody thought it was named after the TV show you guys all watch or whatever. So he is incredible. Incredible football player. So John Riggins, Riggo, awesome. He's definitely on there. Bo Jackson's on there.
I love that.
That's a good one.
You can't not have him on there in just baseball, football. I used to like watching the Royals and like George Brett as a kid, and then Bo Jackson's on there running up the wall and playing football. I mean, just incredible for everything he did. So those 2 are on there. Like I said, I'm not a huge Michael Jordan fan, so the other one for me is Reggie Miller. That guy, awesome. Just love watching him play, going to games as a kid. Watching him throughout as I kind of grew up, he was clutch. Watched the 30 for 30. He's giving Spike Lee the choke sign.
I love that one.
He beat that one team in 9 seconds, scored like 9 points, and I mean, so Reggie Miller is special. Ran into Jordan, couldn't be a past Jordan. So those are 3. The 4th guy, because I'm a football guy, man. I love Reggie White. So when I played, I watched everything I could on Reggie White, and just the way he operated, the way he used his hands, how strong he was, just the way he played the game of football. So I know it's a strange 4 right there, but I think those are pretty incredible ones that I grew up watching, and there's a lot of good ones out there, but those would be the 4. Obviously, I'm football guys, so most of them are football guys.
I love that list.
I love that list
That's a
too.
great list.
Did you ever throw the old hump move in a game?
Yeah, I got it a few times.
Yeah.
So Franklin College got a guy underneath and readjusted and just tossed him. So,
That's awesome.
Yeah, you got it a few times.
That's
so.
sweet. I love the Bo Jackson pick.
Yeah.
I'm an Auburn fan, so he's like an athletic god to me. But yeah, in terms of athletes, like it's hard to argue against him. The guy arguably could have been a Hall of Famer in 2 sports.
Yep.
If he kept it going.
The best college guy, though, watching old films is Herschel Walker.
Is he?
Yeah.
Herschel Walker, it was incredible. And just, I mean, he's that guy too. But he was actually had some really good years in the pros. But as far as a college running back, I don't think there's ever been a better college football player than, except for maybe Marcus Dupree, who you guys don't know who is.
I know who that is.
For like 1 season,
Nope, I know
but,
that is.
I know Sam wants Vince Young or something on that wall. But
Most definitely.
but those would be the guys.
Okay. I like that list. I like how it's personal.
I do
Yeah,
too.
me too.
Yeah.
You gotta-
Because what I was picturing with this is like you'd give your 4 greatest athletes of all time, and I'll be like, yeah, I mean, because like those are going to be the 4 greatest
that's
athletes
what
of all
mine.
time.
I'm sitting here like trying to think of my personal one now too,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
had like LeBron, of course.
Yeah.
Tiger, Brady, and I forgot who my 4th guy was.
Michael Jordan?
Not Michael Jordan.
No?
Of course. Oh, Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali.
How could I forget
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali? Right. But yeah, that's great. A personal one. I think I might have to swap LT in there for my football guy.
Okay.
Just being a Giants guy myself. Yeah. LeBron, of course. Man, now I'm stuck. I don't have the decades of sports experience either.
That's where
I
it
don't
adds
know.
up.
Danny Dimes? No?
No.
Daniel Jones love.
I could probably throw like Ric Flair or Hulk Hogan in there too for the,
Oh, yeah.
for the entertainment
Yeah.
factor as a
Yeah.
kid. Since my 10-year-old loves professional wrestling now, but
Oh, yeah.
but now you figure it out, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be a good one to come back
That's-
for.
Coach
Yeah.
Jeff Pearlman is one of my favorite sports writers, and he does like just books. He won't write articles. He's coming out with a Bo Jackson book later this year.
Oh, nice.
Ooh.
Apparently, he interviewed like 800 people for it.
Wow.
So it's going to be really good.
Yeah.
So I got a quick question from you, stemming from your list, and then we'll just hear your opinion on this because I don't think any of us can really speak to it.
Yeah.
So Reggie White or LT? I know that's like asking like.
Wow. They play. I mean, they play two different styles. Like I think the two best like outside backers ever rushers were Lawrence Taylor and Derek Thomas. Like those two are a little more comparable since Reggie's more like an inside guy.
Yeah.
You know, but you can't go wrong with either one.
Yeah.
I mean, Lawrence Taylor's just crazy. You know, now he did break my heart as a kid when he broke Joe Theismann's leg.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I remember watching that game. I was like, yeah, that stuck with you.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, he was incredible. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so I got one. So I
Go
got
ahead.
one
No.
more. I think is a good
Fire
one.
away.
So we obviously know of the legacies of those two guys, and I've watched a lot of LT tape and stuff just because he was such a great Giant. But having watched those guys in the way that you did, and now seeing Aaron Donald come into the league and do what he does now, do you think he is up in the I don't know, the stratosphere with those two? Is it? Some people are arguing he's now the second greatest defensive player ever behind LT. Do you think he's up there with Reggie, up there with LT? How would you kind of factor him into the greatest defensive players ever conversation from what you've
I mean,
seen?
he's pretty good. He reminds me more like when I watched Warren Sapp play. You know, Warren Sapp's probably maybe a little bit older than I am. I remember he was in college when I was in high school, so he's a little bit older than I am. But that's who he reminds me of because he's not like 6'4", you
Yeah.
know, that kind of size. Like, I mean, Aaron Donald's a machine. Now, Warren Sapp doesn't have the physique of Aaron Donald,
Yeah.
you know, but Warren Sapp had the quickness. Like, Warren Sapp had 15 sacks a season, you know, when Tampa was really rolling. But that's who he reminds me of a lot. But he's incredible. I mean, you can chip him, you can double team, but he still gets his numbers, which is crazy. But don't forget J.J. Watt too. He was really good.
Yeah.
He's really good. I mean, he's had some injuries, but he's really good. But I mean, Aaron Donald's special. I mean, that's an incredible find. You don't have many like that. I mean, so he keeps it going. We can see. You know?
Yeah, I think he's our generation's LT for sure.
Yeah.
And then I think JJ in a sense could be the Reggie White, where it's really hard to compare them, but we both just know those are the two.
Yeah.
And everyone else is playing to try to get in the realm of those two players.
for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Should we do it? Sam's send off by Sam.
Okay,
What do
so I've been talking this one up.
you have.
Recently, I've been on a kick about how Sam Hauser, coach, he's probably like the 18th man on the Celtics roster. They made a special allocation spot for him. Is one of my favorite basketball players because there's no Sam representation in professional sports and the world or anything.
Well, especially because Sam Ellinger isn't good.
Hey, until Matt Ryan outplays him, he's number one on the depth chart.
That's true.
So I took it upon myself to make a top 7 Sam's list.
Okay.
I'd like to share that with you.
Okay.
All. We have 2 honorable mentions: Sam Houston, American legend, and Sam Elliott, another American legend.
I'm a fan. Yeah.
So those first two out. Number 7, we've got Samwise Gamgee. Frodo couldn't have done it without him, right? That ring never would have made it to the mountain.
No, he wouldn't have.
You're nerding it up here quite a bit, Sam.
Don't worry, Coach.
Oh, this is the send-off, Coach.
Number 6, we've got Sam Cooke, right?
Okay.
Great one. No one's going to disagree with Sam Cooke. Now we get interesting. Number 5, Sam Jones. One of the
Okay.
best shots in NBA history.
It's true.
Multiple ring winner.
Several.
Several. Great number 5. Number 4, Sam Adams. Legend. Dude's my namesake. We love Sam Adams. Father Posman and Mother Erica did a great job naming me after him.
Great beer.
Can't comment on that.
Bill Burr's a big fan.
You're still a child, so you can't. That's right.
Yeah.
Number 3, Samuel L. Jackson. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So we got a Samuel now. Capital One venture card.
Well, I'd
Everyone
imagine
loves
not
it.
everyone here is just named Sam.
Now, hey,
Are you just named Sam?
no.
Yeah.
Samuel, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, number 2, a little bit of a curveball. Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
There we
A
go.
lot of great Americans.
Thinking
named
outside
Sam.
the box.
Some
Really?
serious advertisement right there.
Yeah.
Now, number 1, the pride of Austin, Texas. Future pride of Indianapolis. Sam Ellinger. Greatest Sam of all time.
Sam, I got a quick one for you before we go.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you watched, but Pat McAfee, since you are a specialist, Pat McAfee's one of my all-time favorites. He does WWE's announcer on Friday Night SmackDown. He wrestled a guy, Austin Theory, and ended up with Stone Cold Steve Austin in there. It was probably the greatest thing I've seen entertainment-wise, sports-wise. So I don't know if you watched it or not, but love that guy. So
The cell he
highly
had,
recommend it.
Yeah.
the cell he had on the Stone Cold Stunner was electric. He's like,
Yeah.
That
yeah,
was
it
awesome.
Spits his beer out. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was all. I listen to his podcast when I work out. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
Yep. So he can be an honorary Sam. How about that?
He'll be an honorary Sam. We'll roll
There
with
we
that.
go.
let's go.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on, Coach. We really appreciate it. This was fun.
Yeah.
And
Good.
Not every day you get to take a piece out of your head, Coach, on the mics.
Thanks for going easy on me, Sam Posman. So.
Of course. Happy to
That was
have you.
great. Thank you, Coach.
thank
All
you
right.
so
Thanks,
much.
guys. Appreciate it.
All right. And to everyone listening, we'll see you next week.